Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast Circle of Hope. I am your host, Valerie Hope, and this is a conversation about how meaningful connections could really help us fulfill both personal and professional goals. And today we have a very special guest, a friend, I would say maybe like even a recent friend. I don't know, maybe the last year and a half or two, I guess. Jeanne Lambin has played so many roles. You have been a facilitator in workshops I've participated in. You have been a coach for me as I'm, engaging in the writing process of a book. You have been a friend, and we get to geek out and chat about all kinds of random stuff, and kind of a hostess of gatherings for other creatives. That's what I have to say about you. Does that capture who Jeanne is in the world so far?
I think that captures in a really nice way who in the world I am. And also I'm very excited that you didn't add an extra consonant to my name because a lot of people do a lambdin or a lambkin. And so
Oh.
you got the lambin. So I'm still reeling from excitement from that a little bit.
Reeling from excitement from not adding an extra. Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
Lambin. There you go. So one of the reasons, Jeanne, that I invited you to this podcast is because you and I, first of all, I don't know, we geek out about random things,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems like. And you have a way of being able to connect with a lot of different people. I've seen it, like I said, as you've facilitated activities or you've been hosting. And so, first of all, I'm just curious about one, what had us connect? Like for you, if you just from your point of view, why do you think the two of us connected and we were able to engage in those ways?
Yeah, I love that. So, how did we connect and like how have we engaged in these various ways? So I think there's the proximity that we both ended up in the same space. So, one of the first rules of engagement is showing up.
Hmm.
And then also I think that there was a really lovely match to our energy, our approach to the world, like the desire to really create experiences that connect people.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing that was it the something was the first
No,
the
actually,
Decadier.
I don't think you met me, but I saw you at the Applied Improvisation online a virtual summit
Okay. Yeah,
that was
yeah,
done maybe a couple of years ago, and you
yeah.
facilitated something that was really cool, and you seem so knowledgeable. And I may have done a quick interaction with you then, but then it was, I think you sent out some mailing list sort of thing, and I connected to the something from there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and so and then from that then we just continued fostering the connection. And you started coming to the something, which I'd be happy to say more
Yeah,
about.
you
And
should, because people are like, is
what
she
is
saying
the
the
something?
something? What something?
What
Some
is
what?
what is something? So the something is an event that I started, I want to say 2 years ago now. And the idea was to create a space for anyone who wanted to write something, and that something could be anything. And it's a hour, and so you show up, so you sign up, you show up, you say what it is that you're going to write, and you can be as vague or as specific as you want. You can literally just say, I want to write something,
Mhm.
or you can give a little bit more detail and then you write it, and then at the end you reflect on the experience. And or you can choose not to. You can just say, I wrote it, I didn't, or whatever. But the idea is just to create a safe, supported space. There's no sharing of the work, there's no critique. It's just write whatever you're going to write. And that can be, we had people working on novels, we had people working on, books, we had people working on theses and dissertations. And then we had people like, I need to write this email that I've been putting off for 6 months. And the beauty is then you hear it kind of normalizes that writing can be really difficult or writing can
Mhm.
be really easy, but that writing has a lot of complexity for whatever reasons, and that however it shows up for you is how it shows up. And so to meet your process without judgment, and then also to be there for others to do the same. And
Yeah.
so then you started coming to that, and then that was where we connected a lot more, and that was absolutely delightful.
It's so interesting because you're right. When it comes to having a project or setting a goal of some sort, there's always so much inner judgment. Oh my gosh, I didn't do it well enough, or I should have done it by now, or oh my goodness, I don't know where to start, or I don't have enough information. Like there's always this inner critique that we have that's like
Yeah. Yeah.
ongoing. And one of the things that I found this in the applied improvisation workshop that you did, but also in the something, is that you, maybe it's you as an improviser that brings this, but it was just like everything was okay.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there is no judgment. I know you have your inner critique, and yep, we all have it. Cool. And sometimes being together and just exploring that, or being able to own that, or being able to just say it and no one react to it, is enough to let the resistance go. Is that, how do you find that? How do you find that people react to when they have all this inner critique, and you might either give voice to it or they voice it and you react? Like, how's that all work for you?
Um, there's so many thoughts that are trying to get out the door of the mind right now. So
Just
I'll try.
pick the
I'll,
most interesting one.
I'll try and have them leave in an orderly fashion. So the first is that one, I was just thinking that I had read recently that different people have different levels of inner monologue.
Yeah.
And so some people have a very active inner monologue. They have someone who's constantly kind of narrating their experience. And then there are other people where there's just not a lot of like that inner turmoil. And so I'm curious with that one, what that experience then is of self-criticism. But I think that, and I think also I want to be specific about like, there's certain things where it's really right to question, why am I thinking and why am I, what am I, like, to hold beliefs that are supportive of self and supportive of other. And so, but to create a space where those thoughts, where we're not being kind to ourselves.
Mm.
One of my favorite storytellers, so I used to co-produced a monthly storytelling show in Hong Kong Stories. And one of my favorite storytellers, Hee Kung Dennis, um, had this beautiful story that he told. And it was exquisite. And the end of it was, I really learned the importance of being kind and gentle to my own heart and the hearts of others. And I think that's what I really try to create in a space, is that where we can show up with kindness, with generosity, and those thoughts of ours that aren't kind to ourselves and also aren't kind to others, that just meet them first without judgment. And then you might need to do something about it. It might need to adjust, but first just make it safe to engage with those thoughts and hang out with them and see what happens as a result.
Hmm. I've experienced some of that. I mean, as you know, in the process of writing this book,
Yeah.
the book, just call it the book,
The book. I want to have the definite article. It is
the
the book.
book, the book. I have had, so, it started off with, I don't even know if I'm writing this thing correctly, if this is the book I want to write. And then the topic shifted or got more crystallized for me. And as I started to put some more attention and energy behind it, it was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. There's too much. How do I even begin? Where do I, what do I keep? What do I cut? But I think one of the things that really drew me to wanting to have you work with me as a coach is because you brought such, oh, I don't know, it wasn't lighthearted. I'm not saying that it was like a fun and games sort of thing, but what you just said here is that you're kind and gentle to my own heart and about this whole thing. And that made it a little easier. And sometimes I will say that sometimes I wanted you to be a little bit more uh firm, maybe the
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
And sometimes I'm firm, I have enough of my own, I'm firm enough for myself that I
Yeah.
didn't need that from you. So I guess when you're in a role, when you're either coaching someone or facilitating something that's quite structured, someone has a goal and something they want to accomplish, how do you decide when to be firm, when to be gentle, how much of one or the other?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So in those conversations, figuring out how to be like firm and when to kind of not. And it's interesting that you were saying that, because I was thinking about like my own interior monologue, when coaching, and in our relationship, just thinking, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? Should I push? Should I not push? And am I doing this right? Should I really be, do I, am I, should, do I, am I even good at
You
this?
have it too.
Yes, yeah, so I want to be clear, like my inner monologue is very active and oftentimes is not super supportive or helpful, or even correct.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think one thing is that like you were so lovely and generous with also offering guidance on how you wanted to be guided.
Mm,
Um, and also we established in our dynamic like the ability to say, you know, is this helpful? Is this not helpful? And that process of learning, of like me figuring out when to slow my roll in terms of like
yeah.
ideation, or like, oh, this is exciting. Um,
Like,
and
Jeannie, hang on, not now.
it's like, that is not what we're doing here. That is not what we're doing. And so part of it then is to figure out like it so I don't know if I have a good answer to what that balance is, but I think it's checking in, feedback, and then permission and placement, saying,
Mm,
I am going to, is it okay to kind of push back a bit, or is it okay to revisit that? Um,
yeah.
and then, um, and then I think, and this is something that I've been thinking a lot lately in terms of coaching. It's like, it's, it's their show, for lack of a better way to
Sure.
put it. And you might make different choices. And so, the biggest thing is to be in service to the person for what, like, I know there's a model of coaching where it's like, I'm going to push and I'm going to drive and, we're going to get results and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I
Like
am,
the Marines.
yeah, 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 yeah. And it's, and I'm much more interested in that back and forth and that collaborative figuring out together
Mm,
what is the most aligned way to meet the moment.
yeah. I like that. It's like a collaborative challenge or
Yeah.
challenger. It's funny because I had a couple of conversations just this week, one with my best friend, the other one with my boyfriend, where I had to take on, I didn't have to, but I chose in a conversation to take on the role of a challenger that was probing. And and in one conversation it was just with my best friend going through some challenges, but I'd heard these challenges in the past. It was kind of like a repeat or a reboot of some things that have happened over the years. And I'm like, okay, hang on. After about the second or third iteration of the challenges, I was like, hang on a second. How do you want me to listen here? Do you want
Oh,
to just
yeah.
have
I love that question.
compassion and empathy?
Yeah.
Would you prefer just, just me listen and just kind of be a witness to what's going on and how you feel about it? And I said, but what is it that you want? I asked her, and she was like, I just want peace. I want to feel peace. And I
Yeah.
was like, interestingly enough, every time you talk about it, you don't have peace. It like becomes this downward spiral. She's like, I know. And I remember just saying to her, I'm like, I love you and I have so much compassion, empathy. I get it. But I also know that this doesn't seem helpful. And I think for me, the line is when I see or when I sense, especially someone that I know very well or somebody that I care for, what they're doing seems
Yeah.
self-destructive in a way. It goes
Yeah.
or going against what it is that they've said they want or seem to be wanting. And those are kind of tough conversations to
Yeah.
have. And so I kept checking and I'm like, I care about you. I love you. I'm just saying this out of love. But it just reminds me that when we do offer someone a bit of that firmness,
Yeah.
that you said it, right? To do it in service of the other,
Yeah.
not to do it because I am so fed up or I'm impatient
Yeah.
or it's not meeting an expectation of mine. But I think really getting clear. and having that opportunity to just say, okay, what do, is this what I want from this relationship and this dynamic? Am I able to provide it in a way that not making it about me, right? Like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
thought we were going to lunch and you're here complaining about this thing again.
Yeah.
You know, stop. You're wasting you're bringing me down. It's not that, but more about, oh, I want you to have peace and it doesn't seem like you're having it every time we discuss this. So are
Yeah.
there other ways to find it? Is there someone you can talk to? Is there some professional
Yeah.
support? Is there a book you can read? Is there a minister you could talk like that? And I mean, both conversations with her and with my boyfriend both were super receptive, and they were my words. I don't they did not say that I was right, but I think it meant it. You said earlier, like matching the energy. I
Yeah.
find that it became a collaborative conversation, and it wasn't me lording over, wah, 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 wah,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
them cowering, or them defending and me justifying. Like there wasn't any of that. It really felt very collaborative, but just such a it's a tender kind of dynamic to create. But these are people who I have have had deep relationships
Yeah.
with for many, many years. How do you do something like that with a client? Like, someone that's
Yeah.
paying you for your time and your expertise, or someone that maybe is a student of yours, right? Like, how do you do that?
I want to, so yeah, so there's the how to create that tender kind of dynamic. And I love that question. How do you want me to listen?
Mm,
And I also really love the framing of challenger, because I think sometimes when we think of challenge, we think of conflict. And like you said, like, I'm telling you what's right. Um, and there's a status to it too.
yeah.
And
Mm,
there's a way of approaching challenging where, like, I call sometimes things like the necessary friction of engagement. That, like, if in order to land a plane, there's going to be like the friction of, like, like this is a I'm down a rabbit hole of an example that I don't know if it's the right one now, but
there
like,
are some forces, physics
yeah,
takes place. I don't
yeah,
know.
but if there's too much friction, like, things burn up.
Yeah.
And so what is the necessary friction, and the, like, frisson is maybe a better word, but like, um
Hmm.
of having relationships, of having engagement, of having, people in your life that you care about, where things are difficult and they are complicated. And so
Yeah.
that framing of how do you want me to listen, and then, reflecting, like, using that as the prompt, like, okay, well, you said this, but
Mm,
here's some things that I noticed, is such a really beautiful way to structure it, so that construction of that tender kind of dynamic.
mm,
um, on the one hand, I think it's in opposition to the kind of structure of the world that we have now, where
mm,
we prioritize speed, we prioritize immediacy, we want results right away, we want everything optimized, and
yeah.
just those gentle, tiny interactions that create a net for the world. um,
Mm,
those sometimes get lost in the process. So I think one, it's like finding the right fit for people,
mm,
which is something that I really struggled with in, like, finding a client base for some of my work, because it is more grounded in slowness, and it takes time, and it's like, it's not a great sales proposition to say, who am I to tell you what results you will get from this? I want you to figure it out for yourself.
It's not like in 4 weeks we'll have
Yeah,
accomplished five, nine, bam, bam, all the outcomes.
yeah. And it's like, I haven't done also an empirical study to determine, a longitudinal study to determine if these results will actually happen. But one thing that I've been thinking about is, and this is more in, like, in a facilitation space, is like designing the kinds of conversations around when things don't go as planned. And
Mm,
so, like, before a workshop, you set up a framework where that we have, a couple different options. One is just rewind. So I said something, it wasn't clear, or I said something like I did with my analogy where it just wasn't going where I wanted, and I'm just going to rewind and start over.
Uh-huh.
And then there's another element of reset where you notice, like let's say something very simple as like, you come back from lunch, you recognize the energy in the room is kind of different,
Mm-hmm.
and you just change things up to kind of re orient to what the ideal outcome is. Or there's something where something more intense happens and you just want to take an intentional pause, check in with people and reset.
Mm.
And then so rewind, reset, and then redo, is
Mm.
kind of a way of like, what, this didn't work. Let's try and do this again. And then there's the repair. And this is something that I think is really, really hard. And I think it's something that like, and it connects to those harder conversations that you were talking about, like,
Yeah.
is maybe at the heart of that is this desire to repair. And sometimes this
Mm.
desire to repair can be really generous and connecting. And then other times it can feel like judgment, like I'm gonna
Mm.
fix you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what does that repair sequence look like? So, when you're in like an individual relationship with someone, when you're in a community, when you're, in a more formal thing like a facilitation, how do you repair what's happened in the
Mm.
space in a way that's in alignment and for like collective benefit?
Mm. That's so fascinating. This idea of repair. So a couple of things came to mind. One, I have a niece who, when she was maybe about 14 or so, she was sharing all the stuff that was going on in her high school and how she was, a little stressed about some of the things that were happening. And she and I were together one-on-one. And so I started asking her like my best coaching questions. So I'm like, what better person to talk to about these challenges than a coach, your aunt, right? So I start and maybe by the time I got to like the second question or something, she's like, wait a minute, Tia Valerie, are you coaching me? And I'm like, well, actually, yeah. And she's like, I don't need coaching right now. Sometimes it's better to just experience the problem
Yeah.
and have it resolve itself. I'm not quoting her exactly, but it was basically kind of like, I got this. I need to
Yeah.
vent. And I just thought, oh, first of all, I was so surprised that she had such clarity about what it was she needed. Number one, it taught me something, not to make assumptions. Number two, about
Yeah.
anybody, especially even someone that's younger, right? We would assume
Yeah.
that maybe
Yeah.
a young person, oh, that's what they're saying. They need help. This is a cry for help. That she's
And
sharing this.
I'm ready to help.
I am the person, I'm the rescue. So that was fascinating. But then I think when you were talking about, and so since then, she's taught me to ask more, be more upfront. Hey, how would you like for me to listen to you? Do you want me to vent? You want a thought partner? Do you want me to ask you some
Yeah.
coaching questions? Do you want me to give you advice? So I give people some options now.
Yeah.
But I remember in a facilitation, I was working with an organization and it's a bank. So, people who are much more structured in some ways. And that in this particular group, because we'd done some Myers-Briggs work, I knew that like 70% of them were introverts, right? They're leaning towards introversion. And I remember working with them on two different occasions, about a month apart. And in the first occasion, I really like try to crank up my extroverted energy as much as I could to keep the class lively and engaged. It was a full day. And by lunchtime, I was exhausted. I remember almost like dozing at lunch because I was like, why am I so tired? By the end of the day, I couldn't even get in the car for like the first 15 minutes. I just had to recover. So I
Yeah.
felt so drained. And over that month, I started to reflect on, oh my gosh, what was happening that I felt compelled to like really like I had to
Yeah.
over energize everything and overperform. And so the next time I saw the group, I shared this with them. I said, this is kind of what happened because when I saw and heard that this is, a mostly introverted group, and I felt like in order to keep the energy up, I had to bring the energy. And I'm like, but it didn't do me any good. And it probably annoyed a lot of you. So let's reset and redo for this session. I said, I'm not going to work as hard. Not because I'm not intent on making sure that you get what you need from the session, but I'm going to allow you to tell me, to inform me how
Yeah.
much you need from me. And I'm going to create more space for you all. And so there are a couple of exercises that we did that had very low participation. And I said, oh, is this one of those that's not working? Nobody wants to do this? Okay, done. We're not doing that one
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
And it was so, one for me, it was so liberating. I think that collaborative nature, being able to still challenge and
yeah,
and show up, they participated even more without me having to push and prompt and get everybody up. And it was interesting just to see how much space I had to create for them and how much I needed to just be conscious and to be transparent. And I'll stop talking there. I said a lot.
no, that was no, I'm thinking because there's so much richness in there. So, and again, there's a cadre of thoughts that are like, oh, pick me. But one, I think I'll go with the last thing first in that just those, I'm curious about what your process is for kind of those pivots. Because I think sometimes something can happen where there's there's maybe an away or a retraction pivot where it's like, oh, and there's like that panic where, oh, people seem really sleepy and not into this, and I'm gonna change up. And then sometimes afterward, it's like I just, I should, and maybe this doesn't, maybe I'm alone in this experience, but like that moment of like, I didn't key into the right emotion necessarily.
Mm,
And then there are those pivots where it's like reading the room and you're like, okay, this is, I, and so it's such a great feeling when you do that,
yeah.
when you get it right. But I'm curious about like what your repair process is for yourself, if this has happened, like when sometimes there's a misalignment
Mm.
and you made a decision to change things up that didn't necessarily go as planned.
Well, I think if you're talking about like in a group
Yeah,
session, I would say the example I gave is probably the closest.
yeah,
There has been, I remember this summer, excuse me, this summer I was working with another group and also a leadership program. And it was a school district, a bunch of leaders from a school district. And they were in the middle of summer working like 10-hour days, 4 days a week. And they came into the session exhausted,
yeah,
just
yeah,
exhausted. They just completed one school year in the middle of resetting and redoing all the things for the summer break before they started the next school year in the fall. The session that I designed, I thought was very interactive and had some nice moments for them to connect. And I remember the first like warm up type activity, everyone was in on and they participated and they did the thing. And then we had some more talk about the concepts and everything.
yeah,
And then there was maybe about 40 minutes later, another activity that was supposed to happen in groups. And when I asked, okay, everybody, you're going to get in groups of 4, you're going to get some 3 or whatever it was. I explained the activity and like, all right, go ahead, let's start. And nobody moved. There's like 20 people in the room, right? Like, and nobody moved. And I was like, hmm. And then eventually, like a very slow kind of lumbering, of movement began. And I thought, wait, no, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. So I think for me, my process was I really, in those moments, I do care so much about the
yeah,
people.
yeah,
And because I'm a learner, I love to learn and I want to
yeah,
optimize for making sure that the learning environment is a good one.
yes, yeah,
So I also don't want to be the one forcing people to do or not do something where it doesn't seem like it's not really landing for the group.
yeah,
And so I felt very comfortable in just pausing the
yeah,
activity. I'm like, okay, what's happening? And it wasn't until then, and when I engaged them, that they shared this is what we've been working. These are the hours that we've been keeping, and this is kind of the expectations that we have of ourselves and our teams, and like how exhausted we are. And so then it became a whole different conversation. And I think for me, the process, and that's why I love improv so much, because I want to talk to you a little bit about this. I purposely put myself in these classes and these groups where I learn improvisational
Yeah.
technique so that I can be really present and
Yeah.
just accept what's happening in the moment rather than just being stuck on, well, this is my agenda and this is the
Yeah.
activity. And if we don't do this activity, the next thing is not going to work. It's not going to make sense. And I do trust my ability to adapt
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot. And I think so part of the process, I need to trust myself. I have a lot of practice with facilitation. So I feel like I have things in my back pocket
Yeah.
constantly, but I I think listening trumps schedule,
Yeah.
or agenda. And so for me, that's the trade-off that I made. I'm like, okay, I have this thing. I spent a lot of time putting it together. I have it down to the minutes. And no, right now, this is not what they need. They're not, let's optimize for the people in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you have approached something like that? Or how have you approached something like that?
I just one quick reflection is that what I love in what I was hearing is the connection between that listening and not just like listening, but like listening with intention in order to adapt to what's happening. And
Hmm.
then also talking about pausing.
Yeah.
And I think years ago I did a workshop and having worked in different places and worked in places where, people are working across different languages, I really worked on pausing to give people time to think and to process and to speak. But then also, people's thoughts have different speeds. So some
Mhm.
people, their thought is still wandering down the hallway of their mind, like, do I want to open this door? Do I know? I don't know. And then it's like, okay, anybody else know? Okay. And it's like, and they're like, wait, and they're okay. And so,
Yeah.
so it's, so for those of you listening, there were a lot of gestures right there with that example. But there's, that pause, one, it gives people the opportunity to engage, it gives people the opportunity to think, and it gives the emotion a little bit of time to settle. So we're going from, and I think sometimes we can distinguish, is it a reaction or is it a response by if we have the time to take a beat?
Yes.
So like, can we
Yes.
pause? And just all of a sudden now we are responding rather than reacting. And so
Hmm.
one of the times where this I'm okay, there's two stories, but one is that I was doing a workshop, and one thing that I learned to say is that I pause a lot after I'll say something, and here's why. Because I
Mm.
did a workshop and I was pausing, and I had been living in working in Hong Kong for years, and it was like my first workshop back in the US. And my favorite bit of feedback was I really liked it, but I felt really bad for Jeannie when she would say something and no one would respond. And
Because
so
we
it's
pause.
Yeah, so it was this lovely thing of the participant feeling bad for me. And so I
Mm.
needed to like say, okay, I'm good. If no one says anything, I am absolutely okay.
Hmm.
And just to contextualize it. And so I think that that's to what we were saying also of like, here's what, so not like coaching without permission, to
Hmm.
contextualize what we're doing so that people understand how it fits into the larger agenda. And then um one moment where I had a profound pivot. So I designed this whole workshop on the applied improvisation life kit. And
Mm.
it was like I had this whole series of activities, and and I was super excited about it. And it was at the Applied Improvisation Network conference, and it was like one of my first in-person things that I'd done. And one of the debriefs just started going long. And
Mm.
you have that moment of, and generally, like, I love the debrief, so I wasn't like, oh, can we just wrap this up? But
You were facilitating the
I
debrief, or
was
you were
facilitating, so
okay.
I was facilitating, and so I
Okay.
designed the whole thing. I was facilitating the debrief, and
Uh-huh.
we were maybe like 20 minutes in to it, or maybe more, but all of a sudden I was like, whatever I designed is not better than what's happening in
Mm,
this space.
mm.
And it was very sad because I loved the design. I'd spent a lot of time on it. Um, and so I just looked at everybody in the room and I said, I just need a moment to let go of everything that I thought was going to happen and everything that I hoped would happen so that I can pay attention to what's happening and be here for it. So I
Mm.
literally took a moment, took a breath. I looked at all my notes and I had like a whole setup. Like I had prop. I mean, I had things. And then it was honestly like one of the best things I've ever done. Like standing ovation at the end. And I'm not like doing
Oh,
that as a like a, congrats,
yeah.
well, adjusting my little bow tie. But I'm adjusting my little bow tie because it was amazing.
Mm. Ugh, I'm learning to pause.
Look at us doing stuff.
I learn too. I learn as I go. That's beautiful. I do see the value in, this is when we talk about being of service to
Yeah,
others, right? And it sounds like for you, it's an opportunity. Your being of service is also creating and designing and preparing and planning, right? That's obviously of service.
yeah,
And your need or your ability to meet people where they are is really was what was
yeah,
spoken in that moment, right? That
yeah,
this is actually much better than anything I could have planned, or this is what people need right now. This is what they would benefit. Um, and it kind of ties into one of the questions I mentioned I'd like to talk about was this, like, what do you enjoy doing for people in your circle and your network? Like, it seems like this is something that's so innate for you to to be a listener, to perhaps do a gentle push or create a little bit of that friction, like you said, right?
yeah.
So, is this what you like to do most? Is what how would you define this? If somebody were looking for what you offer, right, that you'd love to give, what would they be asking for?
I love to be present for people
Hmm.
in a way that uh, brings a little spark of comfort or recognition or joy or energy. Um, and in listening and thinking about like the coaching conversation, like it is an incredible privilege to, and also just like friendships, like just to be present for someone as they're working through the complexity of life and trying to deal with it in all the various ways that one has to deal with it. And whether that's, as a friend, as a, complete stranger, as a coach, as a facilitator. And like I love having a random interaction with a stranger where we have like a real connection, where like we both end up smiling or, like I really I thrive on that,
Yeah.
on being present for people.
Yeah. Hmm. And I mean, that's because it's you and you exude it. I think it happens, especially when you curate these experiences, right? Whether it's a workshop or you're coaching or the something groups and sort of thing. But how does one ask for that from another person? How I would do it is oh, Jeannie's really good at that. And I have kind of this spidey sense that, oh, that person would be really good and someone I can share this with. And I know that they'll just be present and absorb it. Or I know this person, I can share something and they'll go into problem solving mode and they'll help me figure out a solution. Or I know this person would,
Yeah.
and they will just kind of make it light and not so significant, so I could probably laugh about it. So I'm very intentional about who I share what with,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
I can
Yes.
read
Yeah.
or at least feel that I have a sense of where I might be able to get what I need. I
Yeah.
don't always ask for it though. It's not like I come, Jeannie, right now I just need you to, I need your presence. I need your listening. I need your tender and kind words. I don't ask for that. So how would somebody know, or how do you know what to
Mm.
share with others or what to get from others based on what you need? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm just thinking, so how do I know what to share with others so that,
So you get your needs met.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I also just don't want to make it seem like I'm some perfect, like, always present, always
Too
fabulous.
late.
Like sometimes when I go to the grocery store, I'm like, I just don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to go in. I just don't want to be seen.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's, I do find that difficult. Like I find it difficult
Yeah.
to, it's, um, it's it's far easier generally to put the needs of others first.
Yeah.
And that can be that can contribute then to like being overwhelmed, being
Yeah.
tapped out, like, my spoon is bent.
Yeah.
So um and and it's a weird thing because it's like, so on the one hand it's like I get a lot out of it, but then sometimes I'm not good at like protecting, the keeping the house in good repair, I guess is a good way to put
Mm.
it. But I'm getting better at that. Um, and um, and I think it's a process.
Yeah.
Um, and I think too, it's like you said, that finding the person that's in alignment with the expectation and not to
Hmm.
make it overly transactional, but there are certain friends where that that's the person to talk to about that thing,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
like get it, and then there are other people where it's like a good friend of mine, she's great at taking my very wild thoughts sometimes and helping me simplify them. So
Hmm.
I'll just be like, whoa, and she's like, what you mean is this? I was like, oh, thank you, Pam. Thank you for that. And you also do that too sometimes, in our
I'm a
conversation.
synthesizer.
You're a synthesizer. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And so so I think if we're lucky, because I think that there are a lot of people um who, were in a kind of a global loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
Um, and that some of it, I think that there is a distinction between loneliness and then also kind of people preferring solitude. But I think that sometimes that solitude is just because of like the group that you facilitated, where there's a tendency toward like introversion or just overwhelm, where it's like they might
Yeah.
want to, like go out and connect with people, but it just is too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if there are people to meet, and to connect with, then I think that um that attention to what are their gifts, how do they show up in a way that's connecting and uh you know not and useful sounds to you but like to show up in a way where you're like happy, not I'm trying to make it not evaluative, but like there's a profound moment that you can just share. And even if it's talking about like, the weather or, a really intense thing, but so it's like finding that fit
Yeah.
is a really helpful thing because then you're also being present for for someone so that they can, show up in a way that's
Hmm.
where they feel like, oh, hey, look at me, I got jazz hands. I don't know if jazz hands are a thing anymore, but I still got them. So
I find for some it may be very difficult to ask for what We,
Yeah.
for all of us in some way, shape, or form, depending on the relationship,
Yeah.
it might be difficult to ask for what we need. There are probably are places where we are extremely explicit about what we need and we do not get the need fulfilled,
Yeah.
right? Either the person is not the one capable of giving it at the moment, right? They don't have the bandwidth for it, or they don't have the ability or skill or the knowledge, all these things. But I do find that part of the thinking about who we have in our circle is so important, right? Who we have in our network. I had a conversation recently with my mom, and we were talking about her circle of friends, and she's extremely social, just like me. We have tons of people that we could call up and a moment's notice, go hang out someplace or go to lunch or go watch a movie or just be on the phone and have a great conversation. So that's one of the things I really love about her, that she's so open and she has so many different types of people. And she also finds herself in a service position, right?
Yeah.
And being the one to organize the thing, being the one to, hey, this person needs to get out because they haven't been out. They seem kind of lonely. Let's plan something. Let's get you out of there, right? Let's do those sorts of things. And so recently he was ill, like I mentioned, and has been rebuilding her stamina and rebuilding her energy. And so when she told me that she was going to be hanging out with some of these friends, my mom's in her 70s, so she was
Yeah.
going to hang out with these friends. So I'm like, no, mom, these are the friends that you've been telling me that you've been helping for the last few months. Isn't that the one that you said
Yeah.
is like having some, some issues with memory? And I'm like, this other person is just, has a lot of drama. I'm like, wait, how is this going to be a recharging kind of a recharge for you? She's like, well, I don't, it's fine. I'm like, no, tell me the people in your life with whom you hang out with. I'm asking my mother this, and I'm like, who are the people that you hang
Yeah.
out with where you either could be just neutral, as no, you don't have to overperform, you don't have to give anything, you can
Yeah.
receive, or that you feel like it's really equitable, like there's as much give and take in the, it's reciprocal. And she had to really think about it. And so we finally came up with like three names of her friends. And I'm like, cool. When are you hanging out with them? Oh, they're always busy or they have children or they work or they da, da, da. And I'm like, okay, so could you reach out to one and just say, hey, I've missed talking to you. When should we
Yeah.
let me go to lunch? And anyway, so it worked out that she was able to connect with at least one so far. And that person brought her a meal. Like my mom was so
Wow.
grateful. She's like, oh my gosh, no one had offered to do something like that. And but I think, to your point, one is if we can be, first of all, be so present with ourselves so that we know what we need. I think
Yeah.
that's number one. When we know what
Yeah.
we need, we're
Yeah.
more apt to either scan the horizon to see who might be the type of person that could fulfill
Yeah.
the need, right? Even if we don't ask for explicit, hey, is there someone here that can just show me a, a nice time where I don't have to work and organize? You don't have to say all that, but you can be more mindful when we know
Yeah.
what we need, number one. And then number two, I say have a list.
Yeah.
Like have a
Yeah.
list of those go-to friends. I am so grateful that I have I have probably about six friends that I connect with, and some of them don't even live in the same city, so we don't see
Yeah.
each other in person, but on a monthly basis for years now, we connect on
Yeah.
Zoom or a phone call. And it's always we help meet each other where we are. And I know these are people that I'm going to be recharged and energized by. I'm not in work mode. I'm not in coach. I mean, I
Yeah.
could be in any of those situations, depending on what's called for, but it's always a reciprocal, we feel fed and nurtured by the
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
And that I think can sometimes go missing, especially if maybe we keep our circle small. You don't have to have six people. Maybe there's just one, but one in which we are intentional about what it is we need.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So, a couple of other questions for you. So, I'm thinking about when you connect with others, where you are in life and how, obviously your work apart. Let's just talk about you personally. What are some ways that what's working for you and how you connect with
Mhm.
people and what's maybe not working as well?
Yeah. So what's working for me in the way I connect with people is that um, I have like a real, and it's not like all the time, but when I'm kind of in alignment with how I would like to be, I have a very natural inclination to connect with people and can do that pretty quickly.
What
Um,
do you mean by that?
so like um, I can meet someone and maybe it's just on my side, but like I can feel connected to them pretty quickly and like find
Mm.
points of connection and build rapport.
Mm.
Um, and and I also really try to practice that, so like meet people, listen, um, find commonality, um, and just try to show up. And then in terms of like a slightly and then I also and what's working too is like I the groups that I started. So there was another group that I started 11 minutes to Mars, which was to help people reimagine their relationship with time and attention in 11-minute increments. And it's similar to the something in that people show up, you do something that you can think you can accomplish in 11 minutes and then reflect on the experience. And shocking, time is really wild and ungovernable. And there's reasons why, things are either much easier or much more complicated than we think they are.
Huh.
But the original group that I started in 2021 has been meeting literally every day since then.
Every day?
Every day, every day.
Wow.
And so it became this group where, it's like support, we still do our missions. Um, and then it's a friend group now at this point. So we were initially kind of peers and colleagues, and now there's a lot of deep and meaningful and long-lasting relationships from that.
Mm.
So those are the things that are working well. The things that I think I find challenging are one is just that one stating, my needs. And I think that
Mm.
the it's such a delicate proposition,
Mm.
not just for me, but I think for many humans where it's like one to state your need, but then also to deal with the possibility of it not being met.
Mm.
Or met in a way that's not in alignment with what you had hoped. And
Yeah.
so that's a really hard thing too, where it's like this person is trying, they're doing their thing, but it's not
Not
what
it.
it's not it. And so how do you meet that, that ruptured expectation? And so when you were talking about your mom being sick, I just, I've been staying away because my husband had COVID and I wanted to avoid it. And I needed to come back to the city. And so I was hoping I could stay with friends. But the last thing I wanted to do was like ask friends, like,
Mm.
and so I was like, okay, you're going to do this. And I reached out to two friends. One had family in town, and then another, their child was sick. But they just were like, anytime, don't worry about it. And so I was like, okay, see, you can do this. Good job, Jeanne. Um, and then another thing that I think the thing that I find more challenging is that the administrative burden of existence of just like the technology, the email, like there's WhatsApp, WeChat,
Mm-hmm.
Facebook Messenger, Instagram, Signal, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, um,
Telegraph.
Telegraph, carrier pigeon, letters. Like there are so many ways that there's so many inputs of our time and we don't get extra time
Yeah.
in response to it.
Mm.
So that for me, there's always a desire for more connection, not more connection, but like to be more intentional and aligned with how I respond. And then also sometimes like I can just get overwhelmed and just like drop off. I'm like, I can't, like I got too much. Um, and I And then also it's overwhelmed, but then also sometimes it's like, well, I want to be really thoughtful about my response. And like 3 years have gone by. And I'm like, and then I'm
Three
like, well,
years.
and then I'm like, well, I can't really respond now. If I
It's too
do
late.
respond, it has to be really, really, really thoughtful. And then, it's like 30 years later, and they're like, I just wanted you to say yes or no. Like, no, but it had to be the right yes or no.
And the window is closed.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So that's
Ah,
probably the biggest thing. Like,
that is. Oh man, I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there who probably could that resonates with is that, yeah, asking for what we need and a the expectation that we also kind of the unspoken expectation we tend to pile on the need, right?
yeah,
So if it's met, if it's not met the right way, and if what it
yeah,
means if it is, and what it means if it isn't, what it means if
yeah,
this time it did and that time it didn't. Like there's so
right.
many things. I think so much of it just lands with us being really clear, number one, about
Yeah,
what it is we
yeah,
need, and also exploring what I think the exploration of any kind of attachments that we have
yeah,
to the need.
yeah,
Is it coming from is it a true need, or is there something
right.
else behind that need? Is
Yeah.
it supposed to indicate something about us? I remember I went to this 10-day silent meditation retreat, and I've done it a couple of times,
Oh,
but the first time I went, I remember they told us, don't even make eye contact with people as you're walking around the grounds. Just, this is an opportunity for you to be with yourself. And the only time that we really spoke was when we had office hours with the instructors of the meditation course, which were like a a 5-minute interaction, maybe once a day,
right. Yeah.
right? But the rest of the time, even our meals, we are facing the wall. We were not speaking to each other. And I remember when I told my friends I was going, they were like, seriously, you're doing that? That's the thing for you to do? Can you stand it? I don't think you'll make it 10 days. And I'm like, just watch me. The
Oh, you.
first, I remember the first couple of days, yeah, it was awkward, right? But what I didn't realize as the days went on was how programmed I am to be responsive to anyone that's around me, to be pleasant, to have a pleasant facial expression, to be friendly, to be kind, to be attentive.
Yeah.
And what a freedom and relief it was to just, as people
Yeah.
are walking by me, just to put my head down and not have to interact with any of their energy, not have to
Wow.
say anything or do anything get my fork and knife and go sit in my little corner and and I didn't realize how much I needed that space, that lack of stimulation from other people. And I think because of those experiences, like I said, I've done it another time. It has shown me part of myself
Yeah.
that requires some solitude to
Yes.
get really clear
Yeah.
about what it is I need at any given moment. Because otherwise, I am influenced by so many other things that are happening around me, about patterns and habits I've established, the habits and patterns that people have assumed about me, right? Like, well, you always call because of this, or you always,
Right. Yeah.
that sort of thing. So I think we need to or I found it really helpful to create a little bit of a bubble. And I do that when at home, by the way. I am not a person to invite people over for a meal
Mm,
or to hang out. My home, and it's always been this way since even I was in college, my
that's so.
room has been my sanctuary.
Yeah.
No, you don't come in here. It's very, very rare that I would have people come over, primarily because this is like my little, what is what's the Superman? The
Your lair.
yeah, I guess the layer of the
Yes.
palace of solitude or whatever
Yeah.
he
There we
called
go. Your
it.
palace of solitude.
Yes, and it's a place where I can get really clear about what it is I want and need, at any given moment. Uh, I do want to touch on something, especially because you are an improviser, and I think you mentioned it as we were talking about how we, support and guide people, right? We help them fulfill their needs. You mentioned the word status earlier on in this conversation, and I know in improvisational terms that's a word that's loaded with meaning.
Yeah.
For those who might be listening who are not improvisers, could you kind of define what's the context of the word status, and then how does one Well, first, let's do that. Just define status,
Yeah.
and then I have a follow-up question to that.
Okay. And I just appreciate so much of what you said about meditation and
Mm,
the power of it. And if someone has not, if you're curious about it, I think it's just important to name that a mindfulness practice is not about like not thinking anything or about like clearing your thoughts. It's exactly what you said. It's just like being present for the thoughts that are there and not being troubled in the same way by them.
yes.
And also just what you said about feeling so responsible for others. And I'm kind of paraphrasing, but I feel that as well. Like going out, like I just like I walk out the door and I feel like, and even when I'm inside, and then this is also my Palace of Solitude, and I think we need to create an improv activity called Palace of Solitude.
Woo!
Woo! And so there are people who spend a lot more time than I do, who are experts on status and improvisation. And so there's some schools of thought where like some people, like believe that like status doesn't exist. And then there's the other where there's all sorts of different ways that we have status, and there are all these statuses tied to identity, toward economics, toward, culture, toward all these different things, and um, that we are constantly playing out different status roles.
Mhm,
And there's some schools of thought where status is like no matter what, you're high status, and that's how you're always playing. And then there's other where your status is contextual, defined by the situation.
mhm,
Um, I'm more of a status is contextual and status to some extent. There's
mhm,
certain things that you can't change about yourself. But so, for example, in my one of my previous incarnations, I worked in historic preservation when in some areas I was, known and, respected for X, Y, and Z, but then I would go to a community meeting, um, and no one gave a crap about any of that. And, who the hell was I to come in and say anything about anything? And
mhm.
shouldn't I just leave already? So status is malleable. So does that kind of answer it? And what are the differences in status?
Yeah, no, good. I think in a nutshell, it's really about having a presence of mind about whether or not the situation calls us to be in an expert level of
Yeah.
some sort or in a more uh, I don't know, humble is the word that comes to mind, but that's not it. It's just is a more of a learning in the learning level,
Yeah.
right? But when it comes to seeking support, right, and helping getting our
Yeah.
needs met, how do you think status plays a
Oh,
role? And
yeah.
if so, how does it play a role in who we look to for that support or guidance, and or how we offer support or guidance?
Yeah. So how does status come into play when,
Yeah.
in terms of how we offer support or guidance, or then how we seek it?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that question. And one thing that like Kat Coppett talks a lot about is like ways that we, raise or lower someone's status, and like being, that we can be thoughtful and intentional about that.
Hmm.
That, like if someone's having like you did with your niece,
Yeah.
where it's like you were going into coach mode and like
Higher status.
higher status, and then all of a sudden you adjusted and then had a conversation, then it was like this equalization, then also like her status was raised a bit because you're like, wait, she's doing amazing.
Mm,
um and then we've all been in situations where someone like either unintentionally lowers our status. We say we're really excited about something and they're like, ugh, that. Or you know and that's kind of more of an intentional. But so what I so I'm not super like status motivated.
mhm.
So I like to be seen and heard, and sometimes I just like to be like a little fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Um but in terms of, I think I'll start with the first thing that came to mind is like facilitation design.
Mhm.
That people's comfort, with the activities that you select will vary wildly.
Mhm.
And, that can be impacted by like introversion or extroversion, or like,
Sure.
your status in the organization, what is the culture around mistakes? Um,
Mhm.
like identities, that people's own backstory and experience. And so even things like, in improv, a very common thing is to have people stand in a circle while you're talking and debriefing, and that's also
Yeah.
facilitation as well. Well, not everybody has access to being able to stand or stand for long periods.
Mhm.
Um, and so that simple activity can cause a differentiation in status if all of a sudden everyone is literally standing and then one person
Yeah.
is not,
Yeah.
able to. So thinking about like how we um, design and how
Mhm.
we invite um, thoughtful and inclusive
Mhm.
idea of status.
Mm.
Um, and and then also depending on people's and then when it comes to, and so that's with facilitation. Then the other thing I'll say is about mistakes,
Yeah.
is that first of all, we're not talking about mistakes where like someone did something intentionally and
Mhm.
and brands it as a mistake. Or we're not
Mhm.
talking about mistakes where like, you know, humans, or others, humans, the environment, the ecosystem were harmed as a
Mhm.
result of a mistake. But we're talking about those mistakes that are generative, where, for example, I just am finishing the process of designing a card deck. And I know as soon as I print that, I will discover a number of typos in that. I'm calling it wabi sabi right now in the beauty of imperfection. But if I value experimentation and
Mhm.
taking risks and, doing things, then that is kind of, I have to
Yeah.
embrace that.
Yes.
But for some
Yeah.
people, they think, any punctuation mistake is a moral failure. You clearly just really shouldn't ever write anything, or really just don't leave the house. I should stay in my palace of solitude um, with my errant punctuation.
Wow. Harsh. Who are you hanging out with? We need to make
Well,
a
no, but
list.
I do want to just, this is one tangential but related thing. So, and this is a beautiful status thing. So, I was recently in a job interview for a job that I did end up getting, but we were having a really nice rapport, which often wasn't my experience in job interviews. Or
Mhm.
you have great rapport and they'd be like, no, sorry, see you later. But I just felt like naming like that, I just said, you should really know this about me at this point, that I'm a terrible proofreader in of my own work. And I said, so if that's going to be a deal breaker, we should really just end this conversation now. And they laughed, thank goodness, because sometimes you do that and it's like nothing.
Mm.
And then one of my now team members said, you don't need to worry about that.
Mm.
That's what you have a team for.
Mm.
And it was just such a lovely
Yeah.
and generous
Yes.
thing to say. And it was also so true about the people that I now work with and
Mm.
how we work together, and that like mutually supportive atmosphere where we're all trying to raise each other's status.
Yes. Oh, so good. And I think the words that are coming to crystallize now is, how we elevate and subordinate ourselves
Yeah,
depending on what's happening in the room. And it sounds like, you mentioned that contextual
yeah,
status, right? So depending on what's happening in the room, sometimes we do need to step up and to lead
yep,
and be more assertive. And there are other times when we need to step back and allow things to come up, or
yeah,
for us to own our mistakes, like you mentioned. But I think the key is that if we surround ourselves with a group of people who are there to support and guide us, and we can take turns,
yeah,
right? That we can really support each other that way. I think in really good teams, and in my experience, when we have a really great team, we can all take turns right?
Mhm.
Somebody is going to be the person that, hey, I need to get this done. All right, let's activate, let's support this person. Maybe in that role, they have an elevated status, and others are like, okay, you tell us what you need. What do we need to do? And then
Yeah.
other times it's like, okay, you know what? You've been doing enough. You have a lot going on in your plate. Let me step up for you. Right. And I think it's we can use status to support and guide, but it doesn't have to be something that we lord over people or something that is that says more about how much more important we are versus somebody else. That it can really be done in the spirit of service.
Yeah. Because that type of status is absolutely toxic and corrosive.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm making a connection to what I love what you said about like having this community where, status is this shared collective give and take. And then what I'm
Mhm.
also wondering about is that notion of the challenger as self.
Yeah.
So that, in those situations where there's that need to kind of preen or
Mm.
like, oh, I've done that too, or,
Hmm.
like, and sometimes it's just wanting, oh, I've
To
done that
straighten our
too.
bow tie.
Straighten our bow ties, like, oh, yeah, I've done that too. Oh, that's so exciting. But then there's the element of like, oh, I already know that, so
Hmm.
it's like, so when are those times in ourselves where we can challenge our own, like, feelings about status and hierarchy
Yeah.
and respond, rather than react. And so when we have
Mm.
that reaction of like a status hit,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
are we serving the relationship to name it? Because, sometimes we might have a relationship where someone, they might not have the best relationship with, like, as a bringer of joy, so you'd like say, I'm super excited, and they're like, eh. And so, but maybe they're great at doing these other things. So
Mhm.
like, then I'm just gonna change anyway. So like, how do, like you said, like, think about who's in our circle and how we align with them to have
Yeah.
certain needs met and then meet their needs.
Hmm.
And then in terms of status, what is that reciprocal relationship that we can engage in, and how can we be more thoughtful and intentional about how we can challenge our own um, ideas about status and hierarchy in a way that doesn't subvert our identity or what's strong and real and powerful about us, but also doesn't, make it like I'm better.
Mm. I think, I mean, the thing that's coming up for me around this entire conversation really is that the work that we do in connecting with others always starts with self.
Yes. Yeah.
Starts with being present to ourselves, present to how we think, feel, behave, patterns that work
Yeah.
or don't work for us, uh, needs that we have, needs that are unspoken, expectations that may be unspoken. Like all of those things play such a role in how we elevate or subordinate ourselves. They play a role in how we ask for or hold back from,
Yeah.
right? And so it's really such an it's interesting to think about that when we connect with others, so much of the work that needs to be done is inside work, right?
Well,
And mhm,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
that was about as deep as I could go right now.
That was pretty deep. That was pretty deep because what I love, I'm making all sorts of connections, huh? See what I did there?
Mhm,
But that I think it's exactly right that it starts with self and not in a way that's like um self-absorbed, but self-aware.
self-aware.
And
Yeah,
as I'm thinking about like the work with our circles of connection, like what are those own circles that exist within ourselves? Like
yeah.
what are those parts of ourselves that we feel truly connected to?
Mm,
We have nice conversations with. And
mhm,
then what are those parts of ourselves? What are those circles where we might not feel as connected to? And that might be a part of ourselves that actually needs some work,
mm,
where we're not, so those unkind voices are not completely wrong. And that can make them even more scary, where it's like, oh, you know, this voice is saying things that I know are kind of true. And so then I get even, so it like, you double down on it. And so what is that way that we can call in, those parts of ourselves and connect to them? Like in meditation practice, where it's like, it's there, it's all part of it. I'm meeting it without judgment. Because sometimes, I believe like all parts of oneself, no matter how painful, or embarrassing or weird that we have, that, and and I'm still working on this myself, but like if we can sit with them, you can't change or transform what you don't notice.
Yeah.
And so those connections, to self, then help us make better connections to other.
Oh, so true. It's one of the foundations of the work that I do is working with leaders to make sure that they own them. They're conscious of how they think, feel, act, behave, experiences that they have, strengths and weaknesses that they possess. Then once we own them, then we can do something with them, right? We can master, then either find education that supports learning more, developing it, find support counseling to help diminish or transform it or disintegrate it, and then lastly, in order for us to really be effective out in the world and society, is to be able to then give it, right, to create something that would be of value, design, experience, or plan for something. So I call that my OMG.
I love that. Well, and if you are listening and you haven't visited Valerie's website, I highly recommend it because it's awesome and she's awesome. So
I so appreciate that. This has been a lovely conversation. See, that's why you and I connect, because we can geek out about random stuff like status and have long, intense conversations about it.
Yeah. And I also just love the conversations that we have about design and about activities and just the wide family and food and home and plants and all of the above.
All of the above. Jeanne, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. This is one of those wabi-sabi experiences too, as this continues to evolve, and these conversations, I think, will support people in really thinking deeply about who they have around them, what kind of activities, benefit, how to best approach those relationships. Jeanne, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time and all of your wisdom.
This was so lovely. It's just always such a delight to talk to you, and I always just learn so much. And it's been just such a real I'm getting a little choked up, but it's been such an honor to be working with you throughout this creative process. And I'm so unbelievably excited to see how it's developing. And just, you have, I'm just so excited for more of the incredible gifts, that you have to make them more widely accessible. And thank you for, being kind and gentle with my own heart and the hearts of others.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing all of that too. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Circle of Hope. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, and share with someone in your circle. And if you're curious about the upcoming book, visit valeriehope.com for updates and extras. Until then, stay connected.